Strength training can help both with performance and injury prevention, but it's going to help a lot more if you have correct form. So today I'm going to walk you through the 5 kinetic chain checkpoints. We're going to start with the feet. So feet parallel about shoulder width apart, and you want your feet pointing straight ahead. When appropriate, you want to make sure your feet aren't like caving in or your feet aren't pointed out unless the exercise actually calls for it. Next up is your knees. So you also want your knees straight ahead. You want basically your knees pointing towards your second and third toe. You don't want your knees caving in, or also you don't want your knees pointing out too far. Next up is the hips. So hips in neutral. You want to make sure one hip's like not hiked up, or you also want to make sure you're not rotated one way. Moving on to the shoulders. Again, you want your shoulders in neutral. You want to make sure you're not rounded forward or you're kind of lopsided. Next up is the head. You want to make sure your head is nice and straight. You don't want it like tilted to the side, and you also don't want your head jutted forward or looking up too far. So now's the challenging part. If you were to dip down into a squat, can you keep all these 5 kinetic chain checkpoints? So when you squat, are your knees still pointed straight, or are your knees caving in? Or do you have a hip shift? Can bend lower with one side, and so your shoulders, one shoulder goes up. These are the things you want to look for to make sure you're performing the exercise correctly. Now, of course, if you go into a single leg exercise, I'm not going to be hip width apart, but everything else still applies. My hips are still level, my knee is still pointed towards my second and third toe, and if I was going to go in a single leg squat, I want to make sure all that stays the same as well.